Hello, I am Saint Brad. The last time I made any videos was about a year ago, and since then I've got some extra knowledge and experience with God's chosen believers that help me understand it very, very well, the parable that was written about in the New Testament that supposedly Jesus spoke about. This is the parable about the seed that was thrown on rocky soil, the seed that was thrown into the field with tares in it, the soil with tares, and then the seed that was thrown into the fertile soil and produced 30, 60, and 100-fold. This parable is about the gospel being preached to find God's chosen believers who would connect with us, and then we could share information together. So, in order to understand this parable, you have to understand what the gospel is. Okay, the Christian gospel is a gospel about Jesus, okay, and his life story and all that he said, and his death and resurrection. But that is not the true gospel whatsoever. Those gospels are written as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And if you read them, you'll see that a lot of it was copied and back and forth into Matthew, at least Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so, though that's not the gospel, because when we speak the gospel, we don't know what we're going to speak. Every word that comes out of our mouth is new to us, and nothing's memorized. So we can never repeat the same exact paragraph ever. It just doesn't work like that, because we don't memorize any of this stuff that we preach. It just comes, every word that comes into our mind we speak and write for our Creator. So the gospel then is the voice of the Lord, also known as the word of the Lord, which is God's thoughts, his knowledge, where everything exists. We all came from God's thoughts. So creation is nothing but thoughts, invisible vibrations, which is bits of knowledge that is God's computing language to form illusions that we can observe. So that's how we get a world to see and to experience. So the gospel that we preach shares that information about how God created us, what happened in the past, the present world that we're in, the delusion we're in, and also about the future. So we have unlimited amount of knowledge as long as God gives us those words to write and speak. Okay? Whatever we write and speak is the limit to what God wants us to know. So starting with the first saints, they didn't have as much knowledge to share as the later saints that came along 100, 200, 300 years later, before Christianity took over and all the saints were killed. I'll get into that later, but the first thing I want to talk about is God's chosen believers and this parable. So the seed that was thrown on the rocky soil is the word being preached to people who cannot understand it, or they don't believe it, and they reject it. These are known as the unspiritual people. These are people, and what's spirit? Well, spirit is the knowledge of God. It's his thoughts. So those are people who don't have those thoughts that us saints possess. They don't get them in their mind. They don't understand anything we're writing. They can't connect. It's impossible for them. So they reject it. But this is all under God's control now. Everything was created by God, all planned, created, and formed by God. So he chose these people to reject the gospel we preach. And there's a reason for this. I'll get to it later. And then there's the seed that was thrown on the soil that contained tares. Now in this New Testament it shows that those are the cares of the world, the tares are. And of course the field are the people, the people who hear. So or the soil, I should say. And then those are the people then that they're into this world so much, so deeply. They'll have businesses, they have addictions, there's many things. Maybe they have a girlfriend that they're possessed with. They have many things in this world that keeps them focused on that rather than hearing all what we have to say. They're satisfied with just knowing that what I'm saying comes from God. They're happy with that, and that's all they care about. In fact, we can sit there and share lots of knowledge, and they'll just totally forget about it because of the cares of the world. They can't retain it. If you tell them something the next day, you talk to them, they won't remember anything you said. They just don't retain it. But they like me. They get to know me, and we become friends. And I don't reject anybody, not even Antichrist. I have friends that are unspiritual, Antichrist, believe it or not. They like me as a person, and so I never reject them. They might reject what I share with them, but I don't reject anything they say because I understand where it all came from. So I don't want to argue. I don't argue with them about whether the fact I'm a saint speaking the word or not. I know who I am. But they try argue with me, and I just simply won't argue. I'll say things. I'll just keep preaching the gospel. That's what I do. I don't argue with them. And then they stop. Or I'll ask them a question they can't answer, and that gets them to stop arguing with me. So I know how to diffuse arguments. And that comes with experience. At first I didn't have a real grasp of that, but now I do. So then these people who hear the word, knowing that they know God indirectly. All the ones who respond to me in favor and like what I have to say are chosen believers. They get indirectly taught that there's a creator. Now, whether it's some miracles that they experienced in the past, I've had some people tell me that they had knowledge before they were even born out of the womb of their mother. In the womb, they knew God. Some of them knew Him as far as a young child. They had an experience with God, and then they've known Him ever since. Now, I didn't have any of those experiences growing up. I didn't have any experience at all until, I had some stuff I thought was very mysterious, and I couldn't understand it. And I thought, well, maybe there is a creator and stuff, but I just didn't believe in this creator that a lot of believers probably understood, that I was around and didn't even know it. But especially on December 7th, then 1979, then I knew Him for sure. Then there was no doubt. Because after that, every time He came into my mind to speak commands for me to obey, I knew it was Him immediately, and then I just responded accordingly. Whether He put me on the ground to do whatever He needed to do, or had me start a business that He forced me to fail. I went through things that are unexplained. You can't explain it. It just doesn't make sense. But that's how He formed me. That's how He got me ready to testify to His word. And then, of course, once I start testifying, I learned then that I was one of His saints, chosen saints, who would eventually then go out and preach the gospel. But we have to have a lot of knowledge before we go preach the gospel. You can't just read words in a book and then go out and pretend you're preaching the gospel. It won't work. You just cannot get people to understand anything, because the gospel that they preach from, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are not the true gospels. So they go out and try to share that information, and people who, even believers, will reject them because they know it's not from the voice of the Lord. They know it's from a book that they've read before. Or a lot of believers have never read the Bible. So that's what's really strange. They've never even opened up the Bible. A lot of them have never been to church. But they're chosen believers. I have atheists who listen to me and like what I have to say, who call themselves atheists up until the time they started listening to me. And I tell them that they're a chosen believer. It's just that they weren't believing in the Christian gods and their concepts and their teachings. So that's why they became atheists. They were rejecting their gospels as the truth. So, but they like mine. And I never reject an atheist who comes to me and wants to be my friend. I have several atheist friends who are picking and at me and stuff, and I'm slow at sharing with those people. I don't force it on them. When I get into quantum, if some of them understands like quantum mechanics and some deeper issues, then I'll go immediately right to that. And I'll get to that here in a bit. But so these are the people then that hear the word, the cares of the world drown it out, and they know God, but the world is more important. Then there are those believers who come, they see my sign, they come to me knowing that it comes from our Creator, knowing that this is the truth, and they have knowledge that they've been taught indirectly again. Some of them have read the Bible. Some of them got it by observing movies. For instance, I had a recent friend that told me that he got information by watching The Wizard of Oz. He saw the Wizard of Oz story in a whole different way than I ever understood. So he got taught indirectly then by our Creator through that movie, and of course other things that he observed in the world. And this guy was 59 years old. He's an engineer, design. He actually was on a team when he first started working on a team putting together CD-ROMs for the very first time. So that technology started many, many years ago, early in his career, like 25, 30 years ago. So yeah, it's I'm meeting all kinds of people from all different walks of life, all different ethnic groups, different religions, you name it, they're there. From 8 years old to 90 some years old. There are believers all over here in Campbell, California. So these people that come to me all have various pieces of the knowledge, okay, that they need to connect with the gospel. So when they hear the gospel, when they hear me talking about stuff, something I speak rings a bell, and they already know it. And so they connect with me, and then when I tell them more things, I can bring them to a little higher level. And that's the voice of the Lord that brings them to a little higher level. But once they start mistrusting it, they'll stop there. Because the mistrusting it means they can't understand beyond a certain point. So there's some believers then that only maybe get 10, 20, 30% of what I'm saying, and they believe it on that level. Then there are those some of those people that, and the people on that kind of level, they know that religion isn't teaching direct knowledge from God. They know that they're teaching traditions of men going all the way back into the Jewish days from Babylonian. Some of them have studied a little bit about that, so they recognize that Christianity, Islam, and Judaism has a lot of religious stuff in it that has nothing to do with what they know about God. So they can go to that level, but as soon as I start going into the deeper things that God has taught me, they're lost, and then they stop. So we become friends, but I don't share anymore with them about what I know, because they can't go there anyway. So I have lots of friends like that. You'll see a lot of homeless friends, a lot of older friends that have come to me and realized religion wasn't it. They maybe grew up in religion when they were young, and they rejected it, knowing that it's all crap to them. Okay, so these are those kind of believers. Then you have some of the believers that they can go deeper, into deeper levels. They can actually sit and listen to me talk about the symbolic terms in the Bible and the deeper meanings of them. So I can actually go into the storyline of how God used the prophets to do things, to set up a storyline, and then to bring up all the prophets out of that lineage of the Jews, of the Israelites, the Hebrew people, and that's where all the prophets came along. And of course, those prophets heard the gospel being spoken through the people that memorized these stories, and that's the vocal gospel, the memorized gospel that was taught to Abraham, and then of course ended up into Isaac, turning his name to, Jacob's name turning to Israel. Those guys, they heard the direct voice of the Lord, and of course they were taught things. So the people who were listening to them carried those stories. So these stories were carried along, and that would be the gospel. That's the memorized gospel, so to speak. And so, even if those stories changed up a little bit along the way, you know how people get a story, they memorize it, and they tell it. Sometimes things are added to it, some are subtracted. Well, so that's not that important to know the details of what happened way back then. What's important to know is that through the Hebrew line, these prophets were brought up because they heard something that they've never heard before. And they heard something in that gospel that sparked a light, and that's when God would come into their mind and let them know who they are. And these are the prophets. Nobody else got that information. Nobody else got directly connected with God except for the prophets. There was no chosen believers at that time who would listen to the gospel and agree with everything they said. So the Jews, all the Jews people, the Hebrews, the Israelites, all were listening to the prophets, heard the story and carried the stories, but that doesn't necessarily mean they knew God personally, like all the prophets did. So anyway, I can go on to those levels with some believers, and they can hang with me, and they understand that. They believe it. Okay? They never got taught those things directly by God, but they believe it because they just know that what they know our Creator, and they know what the stories that were told of the past had some logic to it. It had some knowledge there that they want to hear. Now there gets to be other levels, the deeper levels of God, of this knowledge, brings us into things that we can't see. Okay, how were we created, for instance? Now, nobody on this planet knows exactly how God created us. Okay? But He does teach us His creation. Us saints. He teaches us His creation. And what is that creation? Well, that creation is His thoughts, converted into invisible vibrations. Alright? That's His computing language. That's His language that He uses to form all the illusions, all the objects that we perceive as being our reality. So when I go into those levels of understanding, there are chosen believers who totally agree with everything I say. In fact, some of them can go on beyond that and go into the future that God has taught me about how we're going to experience these objects, these illusions, and how He's going to start with just simple little dreams and visions with just a few illusions, and then gradually add more and more and more to the point where we're going to see things beyond anything that we've ever seen before. So when I go into that deeper knowledge, there's chosen believers then by God that can hang with me, and they understand on that deep level. And what an enjoyable experience that is, to know people that already know it indirectly. They didn't have to sit down and write and speak for our Creator for a number of years to get this knowledge. They already know, and that's amazed me. And now I knew that these people had knowledge even when I first started preaching the gospel. These believers came to me, but I was sort of rejecting their knowledge. I wasn't listening to them very clearly because I thought I was the only one that knew the knowledge of God and would have to teach them everything. God didn't tell me that. Okay, He had to reveal that slowly to me. And then after the first year, He brought some people to me. Even in the first year, He brought some people to me who insisted I listen to them. And it took them several months before God finally had me start listening to these men, sharing some deeper knowledge that I already sort of understood. It's just that I wasn't listening to these key thoughts that God wanted me to listen to. So once I finally sat down and listened to these men, these people that brought in some thoughts that God wanted me to hear, then God took those thoughts and went into much, much deeper levels for me to understand. So all this writing I did in Barcelona, Spain, to be taught who I was only the basics that I needed to go out and preach the gospel with. I didn't realize how much more I'm going to learn through witnessing to God's believers, and how much information that He's going to use from them and from other things that I've learned while I was here, like reading certain articles, listening to videos. Eventually now, this last year, I've been listening to videos by physicists and cosmologists and other people who have deeper knowledge. They're not necessarily chosen believers, because a lot of them reject what I have to say. But what I'm trying to get to is that this knowledge that I possess has been taught indirectly to many people in this world. And it has been taught throughout history, throughout all mankind. Pieces and parts of this knowledge has been written down, has been spoken. And there has been groups in the past that have believed we're in a dream. There are physicists today that believe we're in a virtual reality. They don't call it a dream, but they believe this is a virtual reality. That's all computed. It's all put together. And they're sort of right too. So all this knowledge is gathered by God through my ears and my eyes, or that's an illusion, but gathers this information in, and then He teaches me the whole package. So that's why I listen to God's chosen believers now. I listen to their stories, and wow, everything comes together. So we connect on a level that nobody else can connect to in this world. And this is the reason for that. Once we get this group of believers, the saint and the believers who are listening to our gospels, so there's many saints who came in the first 200-300 years after the first one. Now Christians call them Jesus, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what their names were. It's the information that's important. So this information was spoken 200-300 years ago, but it got washed out by the false gospels of Christianity. So Christianity was not started by the saints. It started at the time of the saints preaching the gospel. So Antichrist, these people that heard the word but didn't believe it, were actually stealing the words from the saints, either written or spoken, and using it with their religious traditions. So the Jewish people were the first people to hear the true, the Gospels. There was Gentiles around too that were listening to it, but these Jewish people were into religion. The water baptism, for example, was a tradition of theirs, and they were stealing the words from the saints and mixing it with those traditions. So and of course they were writing about it. So they were taking these words like Christ and Holy Spirit and things, connecting it with their religious traditions and writing about it. So there got to be lots and lots of writings that were contrary to the writings of the saints, but they were there. They were being weeded out. I mean, they were all over the place. People were writing all kinds of stuff back then. So that there got to be a mix of Christ-like words. Christ then is the knowledge of God. Christ-like words mixed with religious traditions and teachings that go all the way back to Babylon. Because remember, the Jews also got a lot of information from Babylon, and that information come from the beast, God's plan called the beast. The beast is used by God to teach men how to build things. So the religious Jews back then learned how to build things. That's why they came back to Jerusalem to start building their false gods. And then, of course, when the saints came, they started preaching about the false gods because they understood the beast. And, of course, these religious people were rejecting everything the saints were saying because, oh, no, these buildings are for God, you see. And all the other buildings might be false gods, but our buildings, our tabernacles are from God. He had us build them. Of course he had them build them. Because that was through the beast. God knew that he was going to have the modern technology in the last days to use as analogies to teach me exactly how he created us. So he needed to teach people how to build things until we finally got the telescope, the microscope, and all the other modern, the computers, the TV, the voice recorders, all these things, cinema, all these things he needed to use as analogies to teach me the deeper knowledge of God and how he created us. And not exactly how he created us, because I don't know if he used a machine to do this or not. In the Word it says he spoke it into existence without human hands. He just spoke it into existence. So that it either could be exactly how he did it, or it could be that he spoke them into some kind of machine, and this machine caused vibrations, and from those vibrations we get the visible world that we're in. So, in other words, none of what we observe in this world is our true reality. Our true reality is in God's thoughts, okay? That were converted into these vibrations where all the illusions are observed. Those vibrations cause us to see things that aren't real. So our flesh, everything that we see, is not our true reality. So there are chosen believers who can go to that deep level of knowledge, and they believe everything that we say to them because they already know. So I don't have to waste my time with them trying to teach them about religion and how, which I did in the beginning. I used to spend up to 3 hours preaching to some of these chosen believers who would just sit and listen. They would listen for 3 hours straight without moving. That's how powerful that gospel is in some of these people's lives. But I didn't have the clear knowledge back then when I first started preaching the gospel for them to get to that deeper knowledge. Some of them probably already had that deep knowledge. I just never talked about it. So they wouldn't have known. Now I have connected with some of those believers that I met in the beginning. And now that I'm going to the deeper levels, they've been hanging with me ever since. And they're realizing that I'm learning along the way. And they tell me that, man, you're speaking things I've never heard you speak before. And I tell them, well, that's because I didn't know that back then. I'm learning it too. I get taught every day. I get taught some new stuff every day by listening to the believers, by God just giving me more and more knowledge continuously. That's because I was created as the Word. So I have the knowledge. It's just that God has to reveal it to me through His plan. It's all planned out. You can't take it all in immediately. It's impossible to take in the full gospel in one sitting. And that's why this Christian gospel is false. Because they hear the Word and they believe that Jesus is the Lord and Savior, and His death and resurrection was real, really happened, and that's all they have to believe in. No, that is not it. That's nothing. That's absolutely zero knowledge because it ain't even true. Okay? Jesus is not the Lord. Jesus is not the Savior or the King. Okay? It's God's thoughts that are called Christ, called the Word of the Lord, called the voice of the Lord, called the kingdom of God. You see, kingdom of heaven, kingdom of the Spirit. All these terms, biblical terms, describe God's thoughts. It's the hymn that they talk about as the Word. The hymn is God's thoughts. That's the Son of God. The Son of God isn't a man in the flesh called Jesus, or Peter, or Paul, or Timothy, or me. We're not. The flesh isn't the Son of God. The flesh is an illusion that's going to die in this world. All the illusions die. So if you're a chosen believer now that can hear this word that I'm speaking, you will understand because you already have the indirect knowledge to believe it. So I'm not saying anything new to you. Now I might be saying something new to people who reject it, but they've rejected everything I've said from the beginning. There's not any one thing I'm going to say that clicks to them because they simply don't believe anything I say because they didn't believe some of the first things I told them. Once they don't believe something right off the bat that I speak, many of them just totally reject everything else I say because they simply don't believe I'm a saint, that I'm here to share the knowledge of God about the future. They won't believe anything. They might hear it, but they don't believe it. These are the unspiritual people. They weren't taught directly or indirectly by God that there is a Creator, that He is going to be spoken. His knowledge is going to be spoken through people named saints or the prophets. They might believe the stuff that was written in the Bible, along with all that religious garbage that from the beast and from religion, but they can't understand the deeper knowledge that any of us saints speak. They just won't accept it. Okay, whereas believers listen, and some of them learn a little more, but others, they already have everything. They're almost at 100%, so they believe everything we say. Without a question, without a doubt. Believers listen. They don't argue with me. They don't doubt anything. I'm sorry about that. They might doubt some of the stuff, but they keep listening to me and remain friends. They never reject me as a friend. I have lots and lots of friends here in Campbell. I preached to at least over 2,000 people. That's a rough estimate. It's not exact because the first 2 years I met so many people and witnessed to so many, sometimes groups of up to 25 people at a time. And these might be a young group of college kids that were sitting out at the park, and they see my sign. They say, "Hey, what's the sign mean?" I go over to them and I preach the gospel to them. None of them argued with me. They all sat and listened, and they all thanked me. In fact, I had small groups of kids, teenagers and stuff, that would line up after I preached the gospel to them and give me hugs and shake my hand, thanking me for speaking the truth to them. Something they never heard before. And it was alarming to me. It was like, there's times I almost cried after preaching the gospel to these people. And because they already knew God. These were rejects. These are teenagers who were smoking pot, drinking alcohol, getting away from their parents who were religious and forcing them to go to church. These were kids that were lost in this world. They didn't know who they were. They just knew that this world wasn't reality. Some of them have experienced LSD trips and learned that this world is not reality. It's an illusion. They've seen how the illusions get distorted when you use those kinds of drugs. And so a lot of believers are former LSD users. Some of them go to really deep levels with me. And they love what I say to them, because they realize that the world they perceive is not the same as what ignorant people, for example, would see. Now, an ignorant people ignorant people are the ones that don't even come to see my. They don't even see my sign. They don't come to challenge me, argue with me, or hear nothing. They'll walk by. In fact, they'll come up to me and say, "What's in the garbage can?" Because if you see, I have a garbage can connected. Let's see if you can see this. I have a garbage can connected to the cart, okay, with my sign attached to it. So they don't even see the message on the thing. They come up to me and ask me about my barrel and what's in it. Oh man, it's just funny. So those people are just totally ignorant to the gospel. They're not even here to listen to it. So you got chosen Antichrist, or that's probably a horrible name to say. To them it's probably a bad word, but it's just to identify them. Unspiritual people. These are people that don't have any kind of knowledge to connect with us. Okay, those people are part of the gospel, because it's very important that they're part of the gospel. And here's why. Those people get jealous of the believers and us saints who share in the knowledge of God. They know we're talking on a level that they can't understand. They get jealous of all the people I'm sitting around talking to all through the day. These are people that go to church, Christian churches around here. Now, the Christians believe they have the truth. The gospel and their written gospels are the truth. They believe that is it, and anything I say they reject. Now, not all Christians are unspiritual. I have several Christians who have come to me as believers and listened to me. They don't challenge me. Some of them did right off the bat, but once I rebuked their lying thoughts, rebuking means just get them to stop thinking about their old teachings and start listening to me. So I can get their attention diverted and start listening to me. And then once they realize I knew what I was talking about, then they trust me and become believers, strong believers. Some of them can go really pretty deep, and others can't. The reason they can't really go on the deep levels is because they've been always taught lies in the Christian church. They were told science is taboo. Don't listen to the scientists. Don't listen to the physicists. They don't know nothing. They're from Satan. They're from Lucifer. So with all this false teachings, their knowledge is put in a little box, and it's really hard for them to go outside the box and listen to anything new. So, but they are believers, definite believers. They don't reject me. They become friends of mine. Some of them go to the church that I stand out in front of every Sunday morning. I stand out there, and that's part of the reason I'm here. Okay. After we testify for a period of time, then we are killed for our testimony. Okay, because with our knowledge, only chosen believers are going to hear it. Once they hear it, they don't really need to be taught anything because they already know it. So there's no more reason for us to be in this world, because the ignorant people aren't going to come and listen to us, and that's probably 99.9% of the people in this world. And the unspiritual people aren't going to get it. And only so many chosen believers are out there. And they're not going to go to higher levels of understanding because God hasn't made them that way. So, He doesn't need us anymore. He doesn't need the saint after so many years of preaching the gospel. So, the group of unspiritual people who go to church, go to these Christian churches, are rejecting everything I say. They're scared to death that I'm going to influence people from their churches and take them away from their churches where they're bringing in money, so that these false prophets can stand up in front of them and tell them lies and make a nice living. Some of these pastors around here in some of these churches are living the life of a rich man. They have beautiful homes. I've been told by homeless people that have been in their homes. They have mansions for homes. They have the best of food. They have the best of everything. They have nice cars they drive. And especially the church I'm standing in front of them, they teach wealth. They teach their people that God's giving them all these wealth, so all you have to do is listen to us, and you'll get what we have. It's all a lie. Every bit of that is a lie. And they fall for it. And they love going to that church because they're listening to words they want happen to them. I've seen people in there that are poor, that I've talked to as believers, before I even knew they went to Bethel Church. They're coming in, they're driving nice cars that they can't afford because they're on credit. I have stories. I had one believer come and tell me this story, and this is amazing. He come to me, he saw my sign, and he had a little business place right off of Winchester Avenue. He saw my sign, and he said, "Hey, come on over here. He said, I really like your message." And he said, "I want to tell you a story." He says, "My dad was a Christian pastor, and he started this church and all these believers, and he got those, or Christian believers of his gospels, false gospels. And he said his dad started this church and had all his people contribute to buy an $8 million grounds and buildings to build their church with. $8 million they spent on this church. That was before 2008. So what he did, he said, he got all these people believing and they're going to get the things of this world. So he got them all to buy new homes. Or even used ones, it doesn't matter. He got them all to buy homes on credit and to bring the cash to him to pay for the building and for his lifestyle. Then, when 2008 come, people's jobs were being lost. And these members of the congregation had to give up their homes because they were on credit. They gave all their cash to his dad, who bought this building. Now, they came, they wanted help from him to live, to keep living. Here's what he told them. "No, this building is mine. This is mine. This is God's work. This is my building. You can choose to stay here and worship in my church or just go." He never helped them at all, and he ended up losing everybody in the church. And he stuck with this $8 million piece of property that's all his. And his son challenged him on it, and he walked away from his dad saying, "You're a pathetic, you're a false prophet and a liar." And he loved what I had to tell him. So there's lots of believers they just know that there's the Creator that these Christian pastors are talking about is not the same as the Creator I'm talking about. And they instantly know it. So on many, many different levels, these believers come to me, and they're all different. Every single person in this world is different. Every saint was different. Every prophet was different. We all have different perceptions, and God uses that perception to teach us who we are and the whole bit. So we all wrote differently. Every saint wrote in a different styles. So he'd use that style to have us write and then teach us back who we are. So even if they spoke different languages, it doesn't make any difference. They were getting taught directly by our Creator through their written testimonies and spoken testimonies like I am today. They all went out, preached the gospel. The saints did. They all went out to preach the gospel and even got information from their believers that God would use to enhance their knowledge and teach them the deeper levels. So the strong believers and the saints get very, very connected. We become very good friends. Those who aren't working in the world, those who are homeless, those people that are on the streets all the time and around become really good close friends because we hang out with each other. And we don't have to talk about the knowledge I possess. We just talk about all kinds of stuff because now we're connected. We all know who God is, and we all believe. We all know Him. They believe. I know Him for a fact, and they know that. They can see it because they see me preaching the gospel all the time. I'm out there in the streets. They know that I'm not a phony. False prophets pastors run the churches. They don't go out in the streets and preach the gospel. They do their 1 hour gig on Sundays, make a bunch of money and live large life, they don't need to go out preaching the gospel because they don't know what the gospel means anyway. So I'm going to end this video right here because that's all I wanted you to know, that the difference between the believers, the chosen believers, the unspiritual people, Antichrist, and the various levels of believers that come to me. And they're not of one religion. They're not of one ethnic group. They're not of one certain age. God used all types of people to become His believers. He chose us. He's using us for His purpose to teach us who we are in this first stage, and that's all the purpose of this first stage was. So after He's done with this testimony, then He'll end the age according to His plan. It's already planned out to end this age with a cataclysmic ending. When the whole earth starts shaking, that is the last day that this world will exist. Okay? So when the earth starts shaking, hot molten lava will blow through the crust of the earth and melt everything into the lake of fire. If you read Revelation, you'll see that. It's in the lake of fire then is when the whole earth is nothing but a ball of hot molten lava. And that's the original created earth, at least the illusion of earth. So everything turns back to the original earth, and then we will all get new bodies and live in a new earth, new heaven and earth. Okay? I called it the next age. That's the New Jerusalem, by the way, in the prophecies. Everything's new. We're under a new covenant, which means we will not understand it as the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There will be no good and evil things that we see, observe, at least no contrast. We won't understand that concept. Everything that we perceive, all the illusions that in the visions and dreams that we perceive, we will know all came from our Creator. And it'll all be good. Okay, let's just put it that way. No more things that cause us fear. No more things coming in our mind and saying, hey, go kill that person. No more of that. Nothing. We'll never see the evil looking images we can't explain. No more of that. No more visions and dreams. No more visions of Jesus sitting in the clouds. No more Mother Marys, hail Mother Marys up in the woods somewhere where people gather. No more of that delusion. We will all know that everything we experience comes from our Creator, and we'll all know that's all an illusion, that it's a dream of God's. We'll know that we're not truly real, but what we observe is our reality, and that's all we get. Moment by moment, that's all we get. In the next video, I'll teach you how He formed His illusions. And I'll use all kinds of analogies, all kinds of explanations to help you realize that we came from an invisible realm. Okay? That invisible realm is God's thoughts. And I'll help you understand that. Now, I can't tell you who our Creator is, okay? And how He created His thoughts to put all this together. But I can tell you how He took His creation, His thoughts, converted into vibrations, and formed illusions. I can help you understand that. Okay, so I'll sign off here. Thank you for listening. If you listen and totally reject this, I can't help you. You're just made unspiritual. You're called an Antichrist. If you're a believer that listened to us, to this, you'll know your place. Okay? Thank you. St. Brad signing off. God bless you all. Goodbye.